Welcome to Unbound. You're here for conscious chats that go deeper than your Instagram feed, where we ditch the dogma but keep it real. So let's get unbound.
Here we are. We're here. We're ready to record.
Yeah.
Episode 1, Unbound.
So excited.
So exciting.
To be here. Yeah.
Why are people here, Georgia?
Really what Unbound is all about is a space to free yourself. I think we're looking to feel more peaceful, we're looking to feel happier, and there are things in the way of that. And this knowledge and wisdom that I've, gathered over my long years of experience being in the space and through all the Vedic traditions that I've studied and trained with over the last, 10 or so years, has been so freeing for people. It's been freeing for me. That wisdom is really timeless. And I wanted to create a space where I could share it a little bit more widely, but also where people can access that knowledge and be able to apply it in life in a really relevant way. And that's what the episodes that we're going to dive into are going to, give a format for that, but not feel that they need to sign up to some kind of dogmatic system, or that they need to discard certain beliefs in favor of others. It's just really an open space to really make use of this timeless wisdom and start to let people get unbound in lots of different areas. So that is kind of my intention, to just share a little bit more widely and support people wherever they're at.
Beautiful. Well, I think we should start by introducing who we are.
Well, firstly, Hannah, you're joining me. Let's get unbound on you.
We'll get unbound on me first. Was once bound, now not. My name's Hannah Davison.
Yeah.
Used to introducing myself on a different podcast, which I'll just name drop here because I can, Untidy.
We love Untidy.
Which we love.
Yeah.
And I suppose one of the reasons that I ended up doing Untidy was because I got unbound. And the way that I got unbound was learning how to meditate with you, Georgia.
Yeah, what year was that?
Over 6 years ago now. So in 2019.
Wow, okay, yeah.
I came on what I thought was going to be a lovely mummy mini break to your meditation course in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. And it caused me to begin an unraveling of the most necessary way, really. And I think, when I went into that, I went in with appropriate reasons that I had given myself to want to learn to meditate. For some reason, I knew I wanted to learn to meditate. I didn't know why, because I thought I didn't like it. I'd tried some meditation before. My mind was really busy. I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. But there was something in me that just goes, you need to learn to meditate. You need to learn to meditate. And I was like, fine. And and because I know your sister, and I expressed that to her, and she said, well, my sister's a meditation teacher. She's got a course in February and you're on it. And I went, well, fine. And the rest is history. And I think because of the beginning of that caused a kind of unfolding of so many things in my life that needed to happen, and it removed the obstacles to allow me to do it. And I think that was, for me, where I got unbound, because it was the obstacles that were holding me back from the things that I really internally knew that I needed to do and I needed to face and overcome in life to move forward. And then once I got to that place of being unbound, I'm still unbounding.
It's an ever deepening process.
It really is an ever deepening process.
Yeah.
But you get more and more familiar with the feeling of kind of like what people would say being in flow, being in alignment and being able to discern a direction that you need to move in. And that's ultimately how I came to be producing and co-hosting Untidy, the podcast, was because I followed these breadcrumbs in that process. And now I feel so in alignment with what I'm doing. And it feels so purposeful and it feels so natural. And it feels absolutely choiceless. Like I couldn't make myself do anything else, which is how we've come to be sitting here on your sofa. Now recording your podcast. In Byron Bay. Recording your podcast.
And I think it's so interesting because the process, when you start learning to meditate, and that is obviously the primary technique that I teach, but there's so many other aspects to the wisdom, and how once you're meditating, you just have this greater level of clarity. You start to realize where things are out of alignment. In order to get into alignment, we first have to move away from that which is not in alignment. And often there are things that we've been hanging on to, staying in unnecessarily, or we haven't had the courage or the stability to make the shift. And that the reason why, I think you're referencing people like, hold on, how does meditation lead to that? Because aren't you just getting calm? Isn't that it? And then you sit around
Isn't
and
your
don't
brain quiet?
do anything. Isn't that
you just
kind
clear
of
your
the
mind?
perception? But with that comes the clarity, but also the stability to make the required shifts. And you can't really ignore them anymore, because the clarity is at such a high level that you're like, okay, this cannot stay anymore. And it's now even greater, in a greater way, out of alignment with you and where you're going, because as your consciousness is expanding, it's like, this really cannot sustain in this next evolution of what is ultimately you. I mean, that's all you're really becoming aligned with, is the higher version of you. Higher being more evolved, more joyful, more loving, more able to serve and offer in the way that you were destined to, which is, in one setting. Of course, there are many ways, as a mother and friend and daughter and all the different pathways, but also as the host of Untidy. So yeah, it's really great to have you here sharing this journey with me, at least at the beginning, to kind of dive into all of this beautiful wisdom, which I know you really love.
I'm a recidivist retreater. I can't stop now. If there's something that can be learnt, and some place that I can go, I'm 100% there, because it's given me so much, and it's given me so much freedom in my life to be who I am. And I think the other part of, I think sometimes people hearing this, when they go, oh, there's things in my life that aren't sustainable and then I'm going to have to deal with them, that's a scary proposition.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of becoming unbound, and that process that I went through, that I wasn't expecting, because you go and learn to meditate, you think that you're just going to go and learn to meditate and that's going to be relaxing and give you some more energy and stuff. I don't know.
But I think there was a junction point for you. You were at a point where you were considering a number of things. And so you were almost, whether it was conscious or unconscious, you were looking for clarity on that and support. So it wasn't like, oh, suddenly, there were some question marks were there.
100%.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to talk about that, because at that point I was considering leaving my marriage. So, that was a big decision, and that was a big juncture point. And for those people who are thinking about the stuff that's in my life that's not sustainable, there is a lot of fear and anxiety that can keep us in things. And I think that the other major part of becoming unbound is the dissolving of the fears that hold you back, the dissolving of the anxiety, the dissolving of the stresses.
And these things are going anyway. It's just how quickly are they going to go, and how smoothly, and how much control do you have over that process? Because if it leaves in 5 years, 5 months, 15 years, it's just you're prolonging your own suffering ultimately when it's out of alignment. If it's not out of alignment, it's not going anywhere. It just might go through an evolution where it improves, where you come back together, where there's greater unity. And, these are all the topics that we're going to explore and really get unbound on in the coming,
and I'm sure
coming episodes.
Everybody's got something where they feel bound.
Yeah.
Whether it be their job, their relationship, their lack of relationship, the way that they feel about themselves, their concern about the way others might feel about them, maybe their addiction to certain things, whether it be Instagram or alcohol or shopping, that there's always some element of us where we feel like that's still holding me back. And this is what's so exciting about what we're going to do, is that we're going to go into all these different areas of life where we can be bound.
Yeah, and largely by our thinking. So that's what's so useful about knowledge and really exploring it. And that's where I find it particularly satisfying, which I do in other areas through other different offerings that I have, is to explore in context in relation to, relevant areas of life of what people are really experiencing, rather than it being this kind of lofty, conceptual, philosophical piece that sounds lovely and pithy, and you put it up in a little quote on your Instagram, but you're not living that. And so once it becomes embodied wisdom, that's when you really get unbound. So that is my intention, is to kind of offer that gift to the extent I can in this space.
Yeah. And I think if anyone's been on Georgia's Instagram, there's an image that's coming to mind, which is like in India. I was in fact on this pilgrimage, one of the things that I was desperate to be on. And you're like sitting on a rock in the Valley of Flowers up in the Himalayas, you know, looking incredibly serene. And I think sometimes people can look at someone like you and go, I'm never going to feel that serene, you know, like how do you get there? Like that can sometimes feel unrelatable because you put the quotes up, you want to feel the thing that you're saying, like you align with the message,
totally,
but you can't align internally. And so I think, you know, one thing we want to explore, well, we're going to explore you, Georgia, today in this
okay.
in this episode, is your journey from where you started to being serene on a rock in the Himalayas, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, my story, there's lots of different pieces to it. And I mean, I don't know how far back we should really go, but I will say growing up, had a lot of stress, a lot of trauma kind of experienced at an early age. I can remember feeling depressed from as young as 3. And so I grew up quite a sad child. Before we begin, a quick content note. In this episode, we talk about depression and briefly touch on suicidal thoughts. If you're in a vulnerable space, please take care while listening. We've included support resources in the show notes. And if you're struggling, know that you're not alone and support is available. So please reach out. We're also here if we can help.
What were your, like, do you have any specific memories of just like looking back and seeing that sad child now, or what that depression looked like at age 3?
Yeah, I just remember like it was always that kind of age was roughly in my mind. So it wasn't really, you know, what my parents had said. I just had this knowingness that it was around that point. And, you know, there's certain things going on and, you know, family dynamics, which let's not, you know, pull up and therapize the whole psychology of it, but essentially, you know, like we're all experiencing our childhood environment and different systems are more sensitive than others and will experience that set of circumstances, you know, as trauma as we know now. And so that kind of was the point where I got shut down, and a lot of people, it might be a little bit later, you know, 5, 6, 10, 15, but for me it was quite young. And I was sort of noticeably like that, noticeably sad. Lots of, you know, family photos, there's me sad and my sister like a bubbly little button, you know, and almost the contrast of that would sometimes make me feel worse because I couldn't be like her, and I could feel that that was different, and that was probably what one was meant to be like. But I was, you know, I would cry nearly every day. And I remember that going through school, crying every day, come home crying every day. I was just so sensitive. Now, if I leap forward now, I have so much more knowledge about my nervous system, my levels of sensitivity, and now I'm kind of operating from a place where I can activate the higher value of that. But this is like a journey from being a very sensitive person who absorbs a lot in the environment. Not everyone's absorptive. And when we jump forward and look at, you know, the structure through the astrological lens, in one of the later episodes, we'll talk about, you know, what produces that and what are some of the, you know, unique energetic signatures that we can see in that space. And that's very much me. So very absorptive. So even I will absorb the stress of the environment more so than certain other kind of setups in that unique energetic signature. So taking on a lot of stress, there was a lot of stress in the home anyway. And then, you know, feeling just like that was just life for me. You know, I didn't realize that I was really anxious as well until literally I learned to meditate, and I was like, oh, I think that feeling is kind of gone. And it's just like this generation, right? Growing up in the 80s, my gen is there was no talk about mental health. There was talk about depression and suicide because sadly that has been so common in Aotearoa where I grew up. And so that was there, but anxiety was never even mentioned. I didn't even know what it was, what it felt like, or the fact that I was clearly experiencing it for so long. So I kind of, you know, got through life. I was, you know, going well at school and things. Was very academic, and I liked theatre, and I was still able to achieve in those spaces, but I was finding just there was a lot of sadness, a lot of sensitivity, very sensitive to kind of friend issues, dynamics, all of that playing out for a long time. And then it kind of progressed onward, and I was kind of overriding it with drugs and alcohol, basically.
Yeah, so my question is, like, if that level of sadness and anxiety was an experience that was just normalised for you as a kid, and that was your experience of life and how you went through it, you were aware that other people weren't experiencing life like this?
Yeah, super aware. And it made it worse, the feeling of, because I wasn't really telling anyone about it. I mean, to an extent it was obvious. Like, my mum knew I was coming home and crying every day, and my sister was probably looking at me like, oh, why can't she play with me more? And there were, some fun times kind of in between, but I do remember like a general kind of vibe of that, because we tend to remember the trauma more, and it can sort of overshadow everything, particularly because of the consistency with which I was experiencing that. And, I went, got to uni, started partying, had a great time, met a lot of friends that, are still lifelong friends now. But I was definitely hitting the drugs and alcohol feeling out at that time.
So
I was partying quite hard.
I mean, I love this because it's now relatable to so many more people. Yeah. Because like when you experience like a high off a drug that gave you that sense of pleasure, release, happiness,
all of those happy chemicals I was not really experiencing. So naturally, I'm very lucky I don't have an addictive personality, or else I could have had deeper problems that I already had. But I don't have an addictive personality, and again, not in my chart quite obviously, and that's also really interesting to see just how different paths diverge. But we were a generation, it was quite common within my friend group, and so it was also very normalised. But I was definitely kind of at the more harder edge of that at times. And I was feeling like I had energy. I was also just very tired a lot of the time. I ended up with chronic fatigue in my late teens. And so I was already on this pathway to where I'm sure everyone can tell that they're leading. So there's going to be some breakdown. You can't keep going like this. So it's already on the pathway of that. And I was kind of overcoming it with having these big nights and putting my nervous system under a lot of pressure, despite the fun that I was having. And carried on like that, through my 20s. I moved to Australia. I started working, got into insurance, and had, a 12-year career there. And in that time, I met my ex-husband, who I got married to, in my late 20s. And my nervous system was definitely pretty fried at this point. And I was kind of using, I was drinking, even sort of through work, social gatherings, of which there were quite a lot at the time in the insurance industry. And then I would kind of need caffeine, obviously, to get through the day. And I was really on that, like needing the caffeine, then going into quite an adrenal slump in the afternoon, and then, having a glass of wine to take the edge off every night, pretty much, I think. Living in London, doing lots of travel, and having all these great experiences at the same time, but also just not balanced. And I was really unaware of the extent of that at the time. Like, looking back now, it's so unrecognizable to me how my inner world was. I was just not aware of anything. I was kind of just slapdash from here to this to that. And I'm sure everyone can look at a period in life, if not that period being right now, where it just feels like you're kind of a hamster on a wheel, and you are just keeping the pieces together, but you feel there's a sense of like one of these pieces could drop. I'd had like quite a severe period of depression actually in my early 20s, where I did and was planning to kind of, end things. And luckily for me, that just was prevented by my sister randomly arriving. Not so random, but she arrived on my doorstep. She rang me the night before. I was like, hi, I'm coming to stay. I'll be arriving tomorrow. And she was coming back from Europe. And at that time, I didn't really want anyone there, because I was kind of really getting to the point of like, I want to tap out of things.
How old were you at this point?
22, something like that. I kind of had a crisis at that point. And I mean, looking back, it's unsurprising given what I was doing, and lots of sort of big weekends and partying, and that stuff it makes you depressed. It makes your thinking go in a particular direction, and I was already sensitive to that. So, but I didn't have any tools. I didn't know that there was anything different. Now there's so much more information out there, which is so amazing for people, but I just kind of got to the point where I stopped going to work, and I was just lying in my bed kind of staring at the ceiling and just being like, I would lie there all day. And I was drinking a little bit during the day, not much, but just kind of like, I don't care about anything, and how am I going to? Because I was just tired of it all. I was so tired of it all. I just didn't want to do it. And I was like, oh, I've done enough time of doing all of this. And nature, which is kind of the term that I use for universal force, that higher value of oneself, and so many different words you might use to describe that, but just it wasn't in the timeline for me, and I kind of got prevented just very spontaneously.
Do you have friends or, family? I mean, obviously you're about to talk about the moment that your sister arrived, the timely moment, who were looking at you and maybe calling you out a little bit on how hard you were going?
Not really,
or
because everyone was kind of
noticing?
doing it. And in fact, I started to stop going out. I don't know if it was around that time before or after. I think it was, in response to that. I knew that I was depressed. I knew that. And so I was like, I can't party. I can't do this anymore. And actually people were saying at the time things like, oh, come on, loosen up, you've changed. And they didn't really want me around because I wasn't partying. And that still kind of is true to this day when people tend to make a shift around alcohol. Those that are still wanting to engage in it find that, is a little bit of a challenge, or it just isn't kind of aligning with where they're at. So I felt a bit isolated for that reason. It definitely hurt, and it didn't help at the time. I told some people that that's what I was feeling like, but I think we were just at an age where there wasn't a lot of awareness where, there's so much more awareness now. Are you okay day? And people are much more emotionally attuned. And we were in a hedonistic zone, like very hedonistic. Different time, not as much consciousness, not as much
People are not talking
awareness.
about mental health.
People were not talking about it, and maybe not experiencing it. I don't think unless you really know it, you know how to respond. People will tend to pull away because it's a little bit like, oh, I don't know what to do here, and you're kind of a drag, and that's definitely what I felt like. And I was isolating myself as a result of those kind of reactions, which is I always stay away more, which again is tough. And I know this is kind of difficult content for people to hear. I want to share it here because I've never shared my whole story in full. There's never been a space for that. So I wanted to kind of drop in and let people know wherever they see themselves in this storyline that we're moving past this. Obviously, we're heading out of this, and that there is really, there's hope for anyone, because I feel like my storyline, the way that my life evolved, was really to come, the pathway of evolution for me was to come out of that, and then also obviously be able to support others in that, and to go to those depths where I know what it feels like to be in that spot so intimately, and yet I don't feel any of that anymore, but I can really hold space for it now and support people, and that's been something that's been really supportive in what I do. So just to note that if it's feeling a little heavy, you're like, oh, it's kind of touching on that for people. Just this is kind of where we're heading to for this. But I'm very lucky in my family that my mum, sadly, also had a lot of depression, and that kind of is also linked to, why I ended up experiencing it. And really beautiful evolution of her storyline is that I taught her to meditate, and she also came out of it. And that's kind of one of the greatest, achievements of my life, to have been able to support her with that and give the gift back. I mean, it's just the beautiful interweaving of the karma and the storylines is really, really beautiful. But she then, as a result of that, knew also, and she's got so much empathy. And so she, my sister rang her and said, oh, this kind of bad, things are pretty bad here, and I think you better get over here. She was there, the next day. And then that was it. I was kind of time for antidepressants, which I'd resisted. I just didn't want to be on them, which is so common as well. I ended up going off them later, but they were useful at that time. I have no judgment for people that take that. I think it's supportive. Do I think it's the long-term solution? No, but supportive at these points. And I was at that point, and I was just forced to do it. And then I did balance out and carried on. But I think what I noticed, I came out of the depression, I came out of the depth of that. But what I noticed was I couldn't access joy. It was flattening me out. And I'm not, as talking about this, I want to say, if you're taking medication right now, do not stop taking it because of listening to this. Make sure that you're getting stable, and that if that's a pathway that you choose to go down, that you do it in consultation with your prescribing practitioner always, which I did at the time when I came off it. But I just noticed a flatness was there. So the lows weren't there, but neither were highs. And it sort of made me feel a bit numb. And also it didn't resolve any of the underlying issues. As sometimes definitely you want to be, which I wasn't really doing at the time, you want to be coupling that with other practices and techniques to kind of support you in moving forward.
I think one thing I can feel might be happening for some people who are listening is perhaps a sense of resistance to hearing some of this stuff if and when you're in a place where you're like, well, when I finish work and I sit down at the end of the day, I like my glass of wine.
Yeah, totally.
I
think go for that.
It feels good. And sometimes I think when you're, opening up to maybe beginning a new journey, but you're also not quite ready to completely release the journey that you've been on.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can be like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready for this whole
No, and I'm not
situation.
saying there's no, instruction here to give up alcohol in any way, shape or form. And I didn't. I was still very much drinking at this point. It's just that if I look back now and I assess where I was at and why, and for me personally, why I was there, these were contributing factors. So this is my story, my choices and how it kind of evolved for me. So it's also very unique and individual, and there's no need to, you can still get unbound and be drinking alcohol. It's just if you're really depressed, then it's not going to be supportive and it's not helping with that. So we just have to be real about that as well. Like it's all well and good to enjoy things and to use them in life in different ways, but we can't say that all alcohol is going to be my pathway to feeling better. It does numb things, and there's a shared experience, and it tastes really good in some cases. I was a big red wine fan for a long time. But if we're talking about I'm really depressed, and what I'm doing to quote unquote support myself through that is drinking, obviously if you're in that spot, you have the knowledge that isn't helping you. You're looking for a way. You're looking for a way to support yourself into having something else that's balancing you, that you're not leaning on that to the same degree. Doesn't mean you give it up altogether. So we have to be real about it, but there's no instruction here on that.
Change.
This is not about giving up alcohol. This is just, hey, and I went on to continue to drink quite heavily after that point. So we're not even at the point where for me it became relevant. But I think so. Antidepressants definitely helped. Having the support of my family helped, which was enforced support, but they didn't really want at the time. But they knew they needed to come in guns blazing and take away choices for me. And they didn't stop me drinking alcohol. They're just like, you have to have antidepressants. Now, if I was mentoring my younger self, it was also supportive maybe to take a period of time, but that wasn't the pathway. I wasn't ready to give that up. I had stopped kind of taking drugs, though. That was the piece where I was like, this I cannot do, because it would just make everything so much worse. No, go into a dark place, and yes, it was just for the day, terrible Tuesdays, whatever the period of time is, till you hit that. But then I could feel it compounding, like the mood was low or extending after that. So that was just my experience of it at the time. So that's what I had stopped, and that's when I was talking about, people being like, hey, I was just like, that I can't be doing that right now. And I think even those people would have a different response now. It's just, it just is where we all were. And I didn't even speak up for myself then and say, hey,
I'm struggling.
Don't say that. Where's the support?
So you're on antidepressants, and you weren't having support from your friend group.
No, I mean, a little bit, yeah. I mean, I think after that, I had met my now ex-husband and we moved to London. And, I was carrying on through that time with the antidepressants definitely supporting, but feeling quite unbalanced. And then we ended up moving back to Australia and we'd got married and things had definitely just were not working out. Things had, there were dynamics going on that I could already feel this is not good. And I felt concerned that I'm now, oh my God, I'm married. And this is now showing up, which it hadn't. We'd been together for six years.
So when you say this is now showing up, problems that you were having in your relationship?
Certain dynamics that I felt and some, some aspects there that I just was like, this is not, I'm not going to bring a child into this. And I could feel that would be obviously the next thing that could happen at any moment. And so I ended up, ending that marriage. And I think we were only married for 18 months. We were together for 8 years. So this long period of time. And I just remember this point where I was going to yoga about a couple of times a week. And I, as you do, you get divorced and then you cry on the yoga mat.
Hell yeah, we've all been there.
And I just was kind of lying there. And I just sort of spontaneously said inside my kind of consciousness, what will you have me do now? I just felt like I've done all the things. I've got to this point. I've got the career. I've got a decent salary. I've got married to this person. We're now not married. I'm 31, something like that, early 30s, which is still very young. But I just felt like at that time, I think there was only one other of our friends that had got divorced. Because we just had people.
You were an early adopter.
I was an early adopter, which was kind of, I was out on a limb. And I was like, but I think even though that was just sort of said in this moment of just throw away, like, I didn't even know who I was talking to. I just had no, in terms of my spiritual upbringing, my mum was really open and she used to have, the odd healer that would come around and a good friendship with a particular healer who'd do the odd session on us. I remember looking back, there are a couple of quite kind of conscious things that I would say to her. And I remember she was always very supportive of that. But I wasn't really experiencing anything much deeper. One thing I remember having was I would have this feeling when I was talking to a friend about a significant moment in their life. They were considering breaking up with someone. And of course, we as friends always have this moment where you're like, this is my moment to make sure that they end up not continuing with this person, which the whole in a friend group could see was just not going well, for example. But I would have this feeling where I could feel this knowledge was sort of downloading, and I didn't really have any words for it. I wouldn't have even said that at the time, but I just had this, my voice would become very clear, and they would sort of look at me and then it would really land, and then they would just take it on in a way that sort of nothing else that I'd said before or that anyone else was saying was kind of landing. And I could feel this, I was just like, oh, and they, a couple of my friends were calling me at the time Jopra or something, which was this cross between Georgia and Oprah. I think Oprah was the only sort of spiritual person that we knew.
She was our spiritual guide.
She was our spiritual guide through the 80s and 90s.
That was the beginning.
Yeah. But I just, that would come and go, and I wasn't in control of it in any way, but it would just be almost like when the stakes were high and that was something that nature really wanted. If I look back now, I was being used as that vessel to just land something. And I'd get a feeling of that energy moving through. But that was really all that was kind of...
So you wouldn't have called yourself a spiritual person at that point?
No way. I was party girl, having a good time.
You're only
going on boozy lunches, and I was doing that while really drunk as well. But it was still happening, even with alcohol there. So that was kind of, and even this moment where I'm like, "What will you have me do now?" I don't even know where that sentence came from. It just was this surrendering point, which I think started this whole process. It was a long unfolding after that, but I feel like that was my turning point. And if I look at the astrology, I've just come out of Saturn return, so there's this big kind of shift has taken where this course correction needed to happen, which is your relationship's out of alignment. So is maybe almost everything else in your life. Like when you talk about,
we're going to start with the relationship.
Change a few things. I was like, I needed to change everything because nature's like, you're over here and we kind of need you over here. And so that's going to take about 75 shunts to get you across to
enjoy
being where you were destined to go. But no one saw where it was leading. I didn't have any idea. No one around me. I wasn't going to be in, the school yearbook, most likely to become a spiritual teacher or something. There's just absolutely no way.
There was no indication, which is what makes it so fun. That this is where you've
fascinating evolution
where you've ended up.
I know.
But I think also when you talk about nature giving you 75 shunts to point you in the right direction, and then ultimately we can see where that has brought you to. It is easy when you're in the midst of being shunted to feel like your entire life is blowing up, that you've got it all wrong, that you can't lead yourself, that you can't trust yourself. And so, and I suppose that does cause you to then be like, I need some tool because I can't deal with how I am or who I am even now at this point.
Yeah, and I think the tool I had was alcohol, which I continued on with. I drank so much the year of my divorce. I was convincing people at work to go out with me on every night of the week. I had a nickname at work, Pinot, because I only drank Pinot Noir. And my girlfriend at work was Sav. Pinot and Sav was what we got called. And she was my main partner in crime at the time. I was living in Melbourne. And that's how I dealt with it, which of course put my system under a lot of pressure. And then I was okay, I'm going to move to Sydney where more of my friends are. And I was just still trying to really make things better through the external circumstances. It was very aligned for me to move to Sydney. It was the right move, but I hadn't really gone on the internal journey at all at this point. I was just just drink so I can continue to party and feel good and not really just ignore what's happened in my life. This whole thing's blown up and I don't want to have to face that. So this is the way I'll move forward. And being in an industry, social industry, lots of drinking, it was kind of easy to do that. But I was very thin and stressed, very stressed, and I hadn't really addressed that. And of course the next thing that came was nature was well, we were only at the beginning here, and I was kind of everyone's now's your time, you'll meet someone else, and it'll all, that whole idea that life is all about finding your Prince Charming, and then that's where that's your ultimate purpose, as a woman, as long as you meet your Prince Charming, if that's what you're into, or your Princess Charming, then that's the end point. People would be don't worry, you'll meet someone. And I just started to be it can't, that is not the measure of who I am. And everything's going to be okay as long as I have a partner, but that thread was definitely there. And putting pressure on to feel I should be in a relationship, because a lot of my friends were at that point, of course, in relationships and starting to have children. And then I got cancer. And nature was I don't think you've really learned much so far, so we're going to make it just really unavoidable now. And that was the big turning point for me, because just it stops you in your tracks. Whatever you're doing, whatever you think is important is no longer important. Your work, just out the window. I remember, I had bowel cancer, and I found out about it because I'd had digestive issues for a long time, unsurprisingly, given lifestyle and levels of sensitivity and all the things. But I had bleeding, basically from the anus. And I just in my ignorance, thought that was IBS or something. Turns out it's not. If you have any bleeding, please get it checked out. But I had this amazing doctor, and she said, you absolutely have to have a colonoscopy right now. And I'm 32 at this point. And I was do I really need that? I don't want to go through that whole thing. She is unequivocally, I'm booking you in. Absolutely.
What a great
I'm
doctor.
pulling strings and getting you in for next week. She's a really amazing shout out, Dr. Minyo, which I don't think she's practicing anymore, sadly, but she is a really special person in my life because of that.
Because a lot of people, this is not an uncommon story where they have to really advocate for themselves and really push to even get a proper diagnosis. If they're looking like, oh, well, you're in your 30s, you know, you're not
no family history,
you know, but these are not uncommon stories.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, looking at it through the spiritual lens and the higher purpose of all of that is that it was the greatest expander for me, big time. But that was a process. I remember, so I went and had the colonoscopy, and I woke up and I was like, oh, I can eat again, have my little biscuit, my cup of tea, let's just get back to life. And they're like, oh, you need to see the specialist before you leave. It's all routine. And then I got in there and they were basically like, you have cancer. And I was like, what? This is, excuse me? No, just absolutely not. You can't tell that where you haven't done a biopsy. I just was spinning. And she's like, we had the amazing treatment in Sydney Hospital, and they had the surgeon come in and look at the tumour, which was a very clear tumour, and they said, we've made you an appointment with him immediately right after this, and you're going to go over there, which at the time I was just like, I just wanted a coffee, I wanted to eat again properly. I was not even expecting this, and no one was expecting it, because I had said, just before I went to sleep or went under, I was like, oh, people go around Googling things like, oh, what happens in colonoscopy? What do they tell you? What are they looking for? I hadn't done any of that. I was just like, oh, we'll get the results and we'll move on. Just wasn't thinking that way at all. And they're like, oh, not much. And if we find anything, we'll laser it out. Someone your age, And they would have been shocked. I was under, thankfully, at that point. But so there was no expectation around this. And he was like, in my experience, it's cancer. And so that was this just stop in the road. The road, basically, if I look back, the path I was on, full stop there, now complete division, detour. You're going to be going over here. You're going to be doing chemo for 18 months. You're going to be having 2 surgeries at least. Surprise third one, just for good measure.
What stage were you at?
Stage 2, so nice and early, but still needed the full treatment, which was bowel resection. Then I had a colostomy bag for 3 months while the bowel was healing. And that was, there were just so many, moments where I had to just let go more and more and more about even attachment to body image and things that my stomach, which had always been kind of perfectly flat, which at the time I was quite attached to and thought was important, was now cut up with all these different, scars everywhere. And I couldn't, the recovery from organ surgery is quite extreme. I was not prepared for that either. There's just no way. I regularly meet people that have surgeries and cancer and things, and they are always like, I wasn't expecting it to be this bad, the recovery to be so long, and organ particularly, I found. I didn't walk to get out of the bowel ward to be let go home. The couple of things need to happen. The bowel needs to start working, which takes kind of up to a week, and you were meant to kind of walk up and down the hallway assisted. Mum was assisting me one side and I was wheeling the IV along, and I think it took me 4 weeks at home before I could walk to the end of the driveway, just to the letterbox and back. So it was really slow, and this is a time where you're on your ass. You're not doing anything. There's no work happening, exhausted, if eating, trying to build my strength up. So much energy is being used to heal the body. And I was just like, I don't even know where things are headed to from here. It was a long process. Were you still living
in Australia, or
I was in Australia.
Back to New Zealand for that?
I was in Australia, and I stayed there because I had private healthcare. My job was there, and I luckily had, through insurance, income protection.
Great industry to have been in, as it turns out.
Second, and it was a salary sacrifice. I never would have chosen to have it. It just happened to be there, which I didn't even know. They're like, oh, just to let you know, you've got this and you'll be getting. Because in New Zealand, there's ACC where they will, I think probably in this case, they'd be paying you out a percentage of your salary, but it's not the case in Australia. So I was getting 80% of my salary for the year that I had off doing chemo, which was so supportive. And it took me a few months to kind of come to terms with it. The first 2 months of diagnosis were just why me and anger and why is all this happening? And my friends are just talking about whether they're having a boy or a girl, and I'm single and going through cancer. So just how is this my life? This feels so unfair. I've already had a tough ride and now this, and I couldn't really believe it. I thought I've been through, years and years of depression. I've got divorced and now I've got cancer on top of this. Like, when is this ride ending? But I at that time started to get this sense of this deeper layer of contentment was just revealing itself, where I got to this moment of surrender where I was like, okay, if I really think that everything happens for a reason, which was something a concept that I had subscribed to in my life with no other philosophy behind it. It's just that. I don't really know why, but I think that that's the case. And then this has to also be a part of that. This has to be happening for a reason. And so I have to accept that nature knows better than me and surrender my individual ego with all of its railing against this experience, how unfair it is and poor me. And yes, maybe it does feel like that in lots of situations that people have, but ultimately we're on a timeline, a storyline that is moving us to a point of greater unity. And that is the deeper wisdom of these ancient wisdom traditions, of that timeless wisdom. And I was starting to just spontaneously have that pop up in my awareness. And I started to feel the sense of contentment deeper than the feeling level of life, deeper than emotions, deeper than the body. And my awareness was starting to drop into that quite a lot. And I was feeling quite content wandering around. I had nerve pain from chemo treatments, and I was waiting for the next treatment, which would be, in however many days. There's quite a bit of physical pain, but I felt this burgeoning layer of inner contentment. And I was like, this feels really good. I feel really good, weirdly, and I'm doing chemo. How is this? Yes, I'm feeling sick here and this and that, but this layer was starting to reveal itself. And I kind of was listening to a little bit of spiritual material here and there, but it was really a spontaneous expansion and awakening that was happening through the vehicle of cancer. If you're loving Unbound and would like to tap in a little deeper, my membership space Pocket Guru is your ideal next step. It's super accessible, daily wisdom notes dropping into your pocket via WhatsApp Monday to Friday, but just 15 to 20 minutes of audio. Like a mini pod, but more intimate. Hear how this wisdom really comes to life in the context of real life niggles. Ask your questions anonymously, listen on the go, and join a vibrant community of over 200 members. I'd love to see you inside via the link in the show notes or via my Instagram bio @GVMeditation.
Why does life do this to us? I don't know, sometimes you look around and you think that someone's got an easy ride and things look smooth for them and that everything seems to work out. And then for some of us, those moments of feeling connection and expansion, and I've certainly had moments like that too, where there was a real jump in consciousness, a real jump in that sense of expansion and connectedness. But it's come at a time times that were deeply difficult, traumatic, painful. What is it about those times that opens us up to that deeper layer? And do we have to? Do we have to have those traumatic times to get that access?
If we're having them, then yes, because we're either already there and we're moving more, because as we progress and expand and we've had these experiences, we start to be more in alignment naturally. So we don't need the great big realignment because we're micro-aligning in the moment. And that's because we're tuned in through usually a practice, usually a tool or technique is required. And for me, that practice has been Vedic meditation as it is for you. But we then don't get so far off track and we course correct ourselves at an earlier stage. But the other piece of this is that we don't grow when we're happy much, because not nearly as much, because we're like, oh, things are great, so I don't need to think about anything. It's all going well, which means I, the little individuality that is driving everything, is where our thinking is I am killing life. I'm killing it at life. I'm doing it all. I'm in control. I'm doing the right thing. Whereas that is just the flavor of time, the flavor of energy at that particular moment. And there are opportunities, deeper opportunities to grow and to go deeper in every moment when you're paying attention. But sometimes you need a big slap in the face to wake up and start paying attention to those subtler signals. And actually, it's the great gift. It's like you're wandering around with chocolate on your face and your mother comes along and it's like, hold still while I wipe this off. You're like, no, don't wipe it. Any parent will be like, you're just having to wrangle that child because they don't know that you're there as that, loving mother. The force of love ultimately is where this is all coming from, to wipe the face so that you're not wandering around with chocolate on it. And that's really what these experiences are. It's only when we're attached to the storyline and thinking it shouldn't go this way, and I only want to be comfortable, and I only want my life to play out like the Disney movies that I watched as a kid and have like absorbed as that's how life is supposed to go, or what society's ideas are at a particular point, which changes every generation and every decade and every year, what one should be doing based on now, let's say, Instagram and what people are showing up there and who's successful and what amount of money you should have and what is a woman meant to be, what is a man meant to be at this point in time. Only when we're bought into that and we can't see the deeper meaning do we lose sight of it. Now, probably with something as big as that, you're not going to necessarily be getting it in the moment, but there are people that do. There are people that I've talked to that are going through cancer and they're so surrendered. They're so in the grace of it and able to see the gift that's been given at the time, even if the body life came to an end, and which it has in some cases. They were in such a conscious place, just had let go of the other perceived storyline or length of storyline even in that case. So it's possible to be there, but it's a very progressed state. And sometimes it's the experience itself that pushes us there. So nature doesn't keep us too comfortable for too long. That's what we think that we want, but the comfort will actually attract something that's going to push you to change. So if you're progressively changing and staying proactive with it, change is, evolve, adapt or die. That is really the fundamental law of nature that's operating for every species, for every being. What nature's overarching law is that we're evolving. It's not that we stay comfortable, and that's what we are subconsciously thinking when we want it to all be a particular way. But when we look at a storyline like mine that we're kind of diving through and mining for nuggets of things, there's quite a lot of plot twists. It's quite an exciting storyline. It's a movie you could watch as you're never really going to know what's going to happen next. It's much more exciting for nature to experience itself evolving through that, for you as a soul to move through that experience than I did this and this and I was happy and then I stayed happy and then,
Everything
no
worked
one
out.
wants to read that story. Boring. Just throw it away at chapter 2,
Yeah.
So there are so many pieces at play of the why, the deeper why.
I also feel like there's a kind of hypnosis that you undergo when you are going through the business of life and you're busy with work and maybe you've got a family and you've got friends and you've got activities and you're in this constant state of motion, and it's very captivating and you're busy, and so it's actually difficult to notice sometimes, I think, the signals that nature might be giving you, and then, or like you have the best intention to like, oh, I'm gonna go to yoga every day, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna do that, and but there's no real major upset where you have to go, the change happens now because there's no other choice. And then sometimes when there's like this massive interruption to
the circuit breaker.
The circuit breaker.
Yeah.
That then there's other things that open up because your attention isn't fully taken up with hamster on a wheel life.
Totally. So you need that one of those shunts to like shift you over further back, and where it's all leading is ultimately just to more alignment, to a greater, richer experience of life, which when I look back from where I sit now, how I experience life now, how I interact with life now, it was all worth it. Which at many points I was like, what the fuck? This is not why. I was looking around, like to your question, did you look around and think no one else is? Constantly. I was like, this, especially at this point, I'm like, now I've had cancer and divorce and depression and chronic fatigue and an eating disorder and digestive issues and probably many other things. It's like, what is going on? Why is my life? And you naturally just go, it's me. I'm just a fuck up, you know. So the circuit breaker is important. It's relevant. It's actually has a relevance. Now, it depends on the capacity of the soul of the being, how they interact with that. Because, of course, lots of people have difficult things happen and then they stay stuck in that cycle. They get stuck in a victim place about it and it becomes part of their identity and they're not able to access the deeper pathway. And that's where tools are really essential, to have a tool that's giving you access to deeper connection with self, deeper wisdom within your own self, even if you're not getting it from anywhere outside of you, but your own innate wisdom. For me, it started happening spontaneously, and then I brought in a tool. But it's very rare that you're going to be able to get there without a tool stabilizing you and supporting you along the way and helping you regulate, giving you the stability, the clarity, while otherwise the tendency is just to get stuck in the everyday mundane busyness of life and then miss the opportunity really until you get forced, and maybe it doesn't need to be that extreme.
So then I think you were mentioning earlier that, you know, when you've got the tool, I can't remember the words that you used, you're able to do minor course corrections along the way rather than have a major circuit breaker like we've been talking about. Because, I mean, we don't want to then get led into thinking like, oh, well, I'm never going to become enlightened unless I have these major
and
dramas.
It's not everyone's pathway for it to be as dramatic. You know, that has served me in where I was going, which was to become a teacher of this, because also it's served in lots of ways where I've explored the pathway so deeply within myself. I've really been pushed to really go there. I've developed the skills and tools and techniques in order to bring myself out of these states, to balance myself in the moment of, if you can do an extreme challenge, then you can do it much more easily, obviously, in minor day-to-day scenarios. And it really enlivened this capacity, witness capacity inside of me that has observed my own pathway that then I use to teach others. And it's been a point of relatability, because people don't come to me or spend time with me and think, oh, well, she's just that Zen person who like lives a hippie yoga life and wanders around in, you know,
white robes
or, you know, expensive yoga gear and hasn't had any challenge. And so I don't really I can't relate to her. I'm struggling, I'm going through this, and this. That doesn't happen in my sphere, because most things, a lot of them, I've experienced so many things that there is an access point for most things that people are going through. And I can also support because of the lived experience and the using the teachings, using the wisdom, using the tools in those moments. And then sometimes it's the next day that I'm teaching about something that I've just, whether it be something subtle or something deeper that I've realized within my own experience.
So you were beginning to have these moments of deep contentment, of witnessing your path while you were going through cancer treatment. And then what took you on further? Like, did you sort of consciously notice that and be like, what is happening here?
Well, I felt like it was a remembering, not from this lifetime, like a remembering of I felt this before, and it felt very familiar. It felt like, it felt very natural. I wasn't thinking, what is this? I was like, oh yeah, interestingly. But I don't think I was thinking about it that way at the time. I was just like, oh yeah, this feels good, and I'm kind of getting into this flow state at times. And then I went back to work, back into insurance. I've been gone for a year. They're like very glad to have me back, and just got back into everything in the same way. I had this much broader perspective on life because I think I've used it as a leveler over the years where I think back, I'm like, if I died tomorrow, because I'd been at that point, like this could be, it wasn't likely, it was a potential. This could be the end. Like, what, am I happy with my life? Am I happy with my choices? And largely I was, because I'd lived from a place of like, I'd done the things, I hadn't held back. I'd ended a relationship that wasn't aligned. I'd gone traveling, I'd done the things, I'd moved to London, I'd come back. And I was like, you know what, I am satisfied that the choices that were available, I went after the things that I wanted. Are there more things I want to experience? Yes. But I had sort of, it made me see life, particularly a life where you can get caught in just accumulation, building up finances and holding yourself back from having certain experiences. And I really felt in that moment, you know, if I was in the hospital, if I had a house, I don't care. I'm dead tomorrow. That's it. But I had accumulated experiences, and that's something that I also took with me, that experiences are really what we remember. It's how we felt during that time. And it's not to say that that pathway is wrong in any way, shape or form. But for me, I was just landing this piece like that's actually important in a sense. And I wanted to get back into life. I'd been stuck and held back. It felt like I'm at home lying around unable to move while I get through the first week of chemo, and then I'm outside a little bit the second week waiting for the next round. And then the chemo cycle, watched a lot of series, whole box sets of things, you know. But that's all I was capable of doing. But I'd kind of surrendered that this was just the way it is right now. And then I got back into work and life and having more energy. I was like, I want to get back out and do things. And I went to Europe a couple of times with a girlfriend, got back into partying again. And the next shunt came along, which is another surgery. I ended up with an emergency bowel obstruction. I woke up in the middle of the night and was like, whoa, this is not good. And I cabbed to the hospital, and they were, you know, within 5 days I was having a surgery. This one was the worst one because it was emergency. It wasn't planned. I didn't get my great surgeons. This guy really just kind of unzipped the whole stomach and left me with a lovely big long zipper line. And I was like, wow, okay. And it was at this point that I was like, I've got to do something different. I can't just keep, and I'd lost access, because when I look back at that time, that feeling that I had, it was temporary. It was based on having a lot of space and time, not being at work. But as soon as I got back into a normal life, I couldn't sustain it. So it was really glimpses of what for me is now a more stabilized state that can be present through all the different iterations of life. So I was like, I need to do something different. And I don't know what that is. Maybe meditation would help me. I don't even know. I think my sister had said to me she was thinking about doing it. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll meditate as well. And I started looking into it. I tried a couple of things. I was like, oh, voice on this app, horrible, 3 days, not gonna keep up with that. Went to another one, felt a bit weird. I was like, I don't know if I want to start dressing a particular way to meditate. Like, this is not me. Found probably third or fourth thing was Vedic meditation, and they'd said it's really good for stress release. There were some other kind of young professionals there, and I thought, okay, this feels more like me. I'm going to give this a go. And they're like, oh, it's $1,000. Oh my God. Do I need to spend $1,000 learning to meditate? I texted a guy that I dated like 2 or 3 times, and I just remember him saying, I'd learned this meditation technique. I was like, I think he'd mentioned this. And so I text him saying, hey, do you think it's worth it? He's like, 100%, just do it. And I was like, okay, I've got that confirmation. You know, I've spent money on all kinds of other things. Why wouldn't I invest in this? And I mean, it was pretty significant. The day I learned to meditate, I was listening to true crime podcasts, Serial. At the time, that's what my mind kind of wanted, like dramatic content, driving to and from the course, listening to that. And then at the end of it, I was like, I don't really I don't think I want to listen to that anymore. But the first meditation I did was 10 minutes and it just felt super deep. I couldn't feel my body. I was like, this is, whoa. And I was running late. I couldn't find something that I was supposed to bring. I was anxious on the day thinking, there's no way I'm going to meditate now. And then I dropped in like to that space and was like, wow, I've never felt like this in my life. I've never experienced this in my life. And it feels really good. Like my body was like, it was like getting a glass of cold water in a desert. Just like, where have you been all my life? Give me more of this. And I wanted to keep going, which I didn't. I thought, I'm going to have to make myself do this because it's good for me. I've had cancer and I'm in another surgery. I'm still recovering from that surgery. Very weak, very tired. I'll do it, but I wanted to. I was like, it just felt like a relief. I felt the tension drain out of my jaw and my neck and my shoulders, and came outside and everything was bright green. And I was like, this is like taking drugs, but only as, only with good benefits, no side effects. I was like, wow. And I kept going with it. And within a week, I just was like, why am I in insurance? Oh my God. Just, I kind of woke up to, which there's nothing wrong with that either. It'd been a fantastic industry and so many friends in that industry, but just wasn't aligned for me and where I was going. But I had no idea what I was going to do. But I sort of felt like after all this time, 12 years there, where I'd always said, if I find something that feels more aligned or I'm passionate about, then I'll go and do it. I'd always kind of had that thought, but I think I had this sense now that it wasn't going to come. I had to leave. I had to let this go in order to find the thing. And I had no idea that actually was going to be teaching this meditation practice. I just was like, I need to leave. And I think, what I'll do is I'll leave in June, which is the end of the financial year. And, I don't know what I'll do then, but I have to give myself the opportunity to see what is coming. But I just felt like I'd been asleep at the wheel and I woke up and was like, whoa, driving someone else's car. That's what it felt like. So it kind of started this ball rolling.
Were you afraid to leave, to let go of something that was so secure for something that you didn't know? You didn't know what was coming next?
That's the interesting thing. It's only because I was practicing meditation, I felt the stability inside, where I was trying to get the stability outside. I was trying to seek it in a secure job and a secure salary, and the way we're trained to do it growing up is get everything secure outside of you. But that is all temporary security, because of course it can change, it can go. The real security is on the inside. And so I felt this inner stability where I was like, oh, I feel like I can leave that now. I never felt like I could before. I'd be too scared. I'd be so anxious. I'd be worrying about what I was going to do. I was like, what's the worst that can happen? Get a job in a cafe. There's always jobs. I'll find something else if I need to make money. But I was like, something else is coming. And I had this sense of, and I don't know, it just was an inner knowingness that to trigger the mechanics of that, I had to leave insurance and let that go and create space for something else to come in. And I started to I was walking up and down Bondi Beach where I was living at the time, and just this gentle conscious inquiry was taking place where I was like, if I left, what would I do? Because I didn't have a burning desire to be an interior designer or a podcaster or anything. I was just like, I don't know what I'd do. Anything. There was no other hidden passion. And this voice just kind of came in my head which said, go to India. And it sounds so strange, which is why I don't really share it that often. But it was so clear, and I haven't ever really heard a voice. It doesn't really, this sort of inner intuition, inner instructions don't often come that way, but it was obviously a relevant, poignant moment where nature was like, we're going to give it to her easy voice, go to India. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? I didn't say that inside my own mind. And I need to go find what that is about. But it's so cliche to go to India. I wasn't looking for anything. I felt like I'd finally found what I was looking for, which is, it's all here inside of me. I don't need to go anywhere for it. And so it wasn't that sense of I'm going to go find it over there, but I had to explore what that voice was all about, what that message was. So
Did you go straight away?
yeah, no, I was like, okay, well, once I leave work, I'll go to India. And how long do I want to go? Maybe nine months or so. I'd been once and loved it, but only kind of as a tourist. And I was like, I always want to come back, but for an extended period of time. And I thought, okay, I'll go and, just see. Maybe I'll meet someone, maybe some collaboration will come up. Who knows what's going to happen.
9 months is a long time.
Yeah.
Like that seems like a long commitment.
Yeah, but I was packing up, I was going to pack up everything and just go and have enough time to sort of see what would unfold. And in this intervening time, I started to just suddenly run into people on my street that I'd never met before that lived opposite me. And they're like, oh yeah, we're meditating. We go to the sunrise meditation. And do you want to come? I was like, I can't believe all this time, but it was almost like until I was on that frequency, that wavelength, I wasn't going to connect with them. And I was like, yeah, I want to come. And they started chatting there were other people meditating, and they're like, oh, there's this kind of knowledge course coming up. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah. It felt, I could just feel that pull inside. And I ended up there meeting, lifelong friends to this day. And they said, oh, you might really like the Ayurvedic healing process, Panchakarma in India. There's a really amazing place with the Rajus, where I've been many times now, to experience that in Hyderabad. And I thought, that's where I'll go. I've had cancer, chemo, great, I'll start there. It's meant to be 4 weeks, I'll go there. Then I met everything started to flow. The moment I'd let go and created space, I'd said yes to that instruction, and I had put into action the letting go of the corporate job, everything just
started to come
so quickly, effortlessly.
There are a few terms there that you might just need to clarify. Panchakarma, the Rajus.
Yes, Panchakarma. Ayurveda is one of the Vedic sciences. It's really just a body of wisdom that's supportive for how to live in alignment with the rhythms of nature, and thereby experiencing health and longevity and bliss in the body. This is something that we don't really in the West focus on. Health is a measure of sometimes longevity, sometimes just the absence of disease, but not actual bliss in the body. So it's a really profound body of ancient wisdom that's still so relevant to today. And they have a system called Panchakarma, which means the 5 actions. The karma piece, also part of the healing process, is correcting the karma, which happens through herbs. Some of the treatments contain mantra, so it's vibrational medicine, a lot of oil, hours of treatment a day, and it's resetting the entire physiology. So I think that is one of the physical health treatments. Though they always say you need to be meditating. If you arrive there, you're not meditating, they will send you off to someone to learn, because if the consciousness underneath is really the baseline of what creates the physiology. So if the consciousness isn't being balanced, the stress isn't being balanced, there's no point putting a whole lot of stuff on top. So there's so much wisdom about the integration of the holistic system. But yeah, it was a good time for me to go and have that full 4-week reset. And then he was like, you need to come back for more. I went back for another 3 weeks after that. So I spent a long time there, kind of really giving my body time to heal. I think that's one of the things that set me in such good health heading on from there. And I felt like it really did help with the chemo build-up and things that would have been there. So I was like, okay, I'll start there. Then I met someone who was doing a pilgrimage just after my Panchakarma ended to some of the temples in North India. I was like, oh, that feels like intuitively charming. I'll go there. And then I ran into a friend of mine. She's like, the teacher training is on in India while you're there to become a teacher of Vedic meditation. And I had this experience where I felt this kind of concrete pole of certainty go through my body that was not from my mind. That was like absolute certainty that I would be doing that. And then this whole physiological reaction of freaking out at the same time. And my body was like, whoa, we didn't decide this. Oh my God, I don't know if I want to be that. Like, what will everyone think? And just this whole schism where one part of me was saying, the higher part, obviously, was saying this will be happening and get with the program, like immediately. I'm not even going to let you try and decide this on your own, because get moving. And the other part
You're
was
in India
like,
for a reason.
So I started the application process, and I was kind of very much an outlier of who they were going to approve, but they could feel, I think, that all that I'd been through and where my kind of state of consciousness was at the time, and I ended up going. And so that is where it all started to move super fast once I started meditating.
So you went to do the teacher training in India.
Yeah.
How long does that take?
It's a 3-month training, and it's really designed to create the state of consciousness of the teacher. A lot of it is about intensive meditation through the rounding process, which is a technique that we use in the Vedic tradition. It involves yoga asana, then breathwork, then meditation, considered to be a round. And it has the effect of just rinsing out a lot of stress, because when you're a facilitator of something, you need to be able to hold space at a different level. You can't really be still cleaning up the bulk of your backyard before you go starting to help others clean up theirs. Sometimes we can do that from a position of, I just want to help others, but we haven't helped ourselves first. You know, that whole affix your own oxygen mask before you put the babies on. This is really that. It's this rinsing out so much stress that you're in this deeper state of consciousness that allows you to tap into a natural flow of wisdom that supports the mechanics of teaching the actual process of meditation.
So when you're talking about stress, I think sometimes it's easy to think about stress as in like, well, how stressed am I right now? Like, how busy is work? What are the demands of the family? You know, what's going on the schedule? Am I tired? You know, I think sometimes we can think about stress like that, but you're talking about many layers of stresses.
I am talking about stress as kind of a catch-all term for anything that's been stored or accumulated in the body. So any overload of experience we would consider to be stress that's accumulated. Of course, if we have a stress response and then it's fully resolved, it doesn't accumulate. So I'm talking more about accumulated stress, which is then, of course, makes up the picture of where you are right now, because stress is a response to stimulus. So there's days where you're really stressed and your child will say one thing to you and you're going to fly off the handle. There's other days where your bandwidth is much deeper and much more, you've got much more adaptability and you have a lot more patience. And so it's what is the baseline of that, and what are the bundle of triggers that you've accumulated, the absorbed experiences, the absorbed stress around you at certain tender moments in your development that's making up the bundle of your backlog of stresses.
So this is our library that we have.
Different sections of the library, different, sizes of books and different amount of books. And so, what that does is it clogs up the system. It prevents you from seeing clearly, from having an appropriate reaction in the moment. It ends up that you are habitually responding in a way based on your stress rather than approaching life in an open way, being able to meet the need of the time and actually see it clearly, because we're seeing through the lens of our trauma, really, until that lens starts to clear and then we can start to see things more clearly.
Yeah. So this is going back through your entire life.
It's, digging away at a whole lot of the whole backlog of accumulated stress. If you do an intensive process like that, the body, and you don't have any incoming stress because you're here away in this environment where I was in India, I'm not working, I'm not even cooking my own meals. The meals are provided there. We are studying and taking in knowledge as well as learning various things related to teaching, but primarily we're getting through the backlog. And also you've been meditating for a while, so you're not able to do teacher training unless you've been meditating at least, usually 18 months to 2 years. So you've already worked through layers of stress, and now we're really cleaning out the backlog that gives you the capacity to be an effective teacher, really.
And so what did you feel at the end of that? Like, do you remember a contrast between how you were going in and how you were coming out?
I remember a process the week before, because I really wanted to be there. I felt that I moved through that initial fear of like, fuck. I had to tell my dad that I was leaving my high-paying corporate job to become a meditation teacher. And he went white for 2 days. He was just like, just devastated, I think. And he didn't really know what that meant. And I think he was worried, would I make money and was I going to become all weird and all the things, which based on kind of where he was at. But I could feel that pull, the charm was so unequivocal which really helped me to get there. But then this week before, I was in Rishikesh about to embark on training and I started this grieving and I was just grieving, crying. And I was like, what is going on here? And I realized I was grieving my smaller self, basically the part of me that I was leaving behind, which is something that happens for everyone as they go through different stages, where you can sometimes glimpse this moment where you don't want to let go of where you're at. But because my consciousness knew the leap was going to be so big, it was a much more pronounced grieving, which I was not expecting. I was like, whoa. And I just had to be with it. And I was like, okay. And this obviously, and then I was like, what am I going to become if this is the shedding that I haven't even started the process? But then afterwards, I was just entirely different state. Same person, but just, I remember my mind would try to go down like one of its old negative pathways that were very ingrained, as you can imagine from what I've shared. And it would just stop. It just couldn't go there anymore. It would just come back. I couldn't go down these negative rabbit holes anymore. My mind just wouldn't, it had been infused with so much bliss of months of meditating that it just was so quiet. I felt this in like deep sense of contentment that was very much established. Like before it had been glimpses, this was now really profound. Like I just felt very fulfilled, very present. And when I got home, my sister said to me, my younger sister Rosie was like, you're just like you, but all the shit is gone. And I think I do want to learn to meditate. She was 22 at the time. She's like, I know I'm not learning that. And I was like, that's fine. I'm just going to kind of do an intro talk and let people, if you want to be there, see what I've been doing, come along. If you want to learn, you can. I'm unattached. So I think I do want to learn to meditate because of, this difference that I'm seeing in you. So there was quite a dramatic change from that.
Sometimes I think, like, you might hear something like that and think to yourself, well, look, I went on holiday to Fiji and let me tell you, I felt like a different person at the end of that 2-week holiday, but then you get back into life and then like everything just creeps back in, the old way of feeling and stuff like that. So that didn't happen for you. You stayed established in that contentment and in that bliss.
It wasn't because a holiday is such a short period of time and you're not doing anything on the holiday. Firstly, some people go away and they're so active that they need a holiday from the holiday. We've all been there. Or we're resting, but we're actually recovering because we weren't giving the body enough rest prior to that. So there's a recovery period. You're not getting much deeper than that. You're also not putting in a practice. So I've just taken a group to Bali to do that rounding practice for a week. And they all described at the end they're in a profoundly different state. They've released a lot and they feel so different. And it's until you've experienced that, it's a different permanent shift because you can't get back the stress that you've released. It's already gone, so it can't reaccumulate. There are definitely certain triggers, some deep traumas that will still be there if they're very deeply embedded. That's still going to be there, but the level at which it's impacting, it might have gone from 80% that trigger is really pinging off the charts to now it's like 10% and you're just like, oh yeah, and you forget about it almost. So it's not that it's over. There's always a deepening. There's always more stress and more refinement of your, experience, but it does shift a lot of the backlog, and that's obviously going to have an impact.
So you get home and you do an intro talk for your first course. Were you worried that anyone was going to turn up?
Oh my God. I remember I actually came back in 2 days after I landed from India. I hosted an intro talk. I just had the sense I need to just do this straight away. And the first one was in Sydney. I had some notes. I mean, those that attend intro talks now know that there are no notes. It's just like a complete free flow. I had some notes. I had a group of friends that very generously came to support me in Sydney. And A couple of them learned. They signed up to learn that week. I taught those 2. The next week, there were 5 more that were their friends that had heard. And it just kind of kept rolling like that. I went back to New Zealand. I really wanted to teach my family, offer them the opportunity. Mum had already said, the moment you get back, I want to learn this. So I wanted to go back home and do that there. And I remember, I had a couple of big intro talks where about 20 people, 22 people came in Auckland and 15 or 20 people came in Hawke's Bay. I think people had been watching me on Facebook at the time. I don't think there was even any Instagram. Had watched the evolution of my journey from the cancer piece, and I was posting things about what I was realizing and deeper thoughts that I had, and they must have been like, she's really changed. Something's going on. She's a stress bag. And now...
Where's Pinot gone?
Pinot has really evolved. And maybe I just want to know a bit more. And so, my first kind of groups of students came off those groups, and which were my mum and my sister. My other sister, Scarlett, had already learned earlier. And it was really special to share it and to see, for me, I knew what it did for me, but I'd never taught it. I didn't know what it would do when I taught it. Was it going to do the same thing? And it turns out it just kept delivering every time. And it just built through word of mouth largely, where I didn't even have a website. The first 50 people, I had no website. It was just people would go and tell the next person, oh my God, I feel so good. Or they'd see them in Havelock North supermarket glowing after receiving their mantra and having their first meditation. And like, what's your face? There were these stories that were coming through. Mum wandering around, people like, oh my God, she's a changed woman. She just looks so different. I want to do whatever she's been doing. And it just built up to the point where, now I've been teaching for 9 years and taught, I think it's over 1,500 or something people to meditate now. And it continues to be as rich as it was right at the beginning.
What was the response to you from your family? Just going back to when you first got back, like when they saw before Georgia becoming teacher and then after Georgia becoming teacher. Do you remember anything that they said at that time?
I mean, I shared with you what Rosie said. I remember my mum one day, we ran into our old school principal from Wanganui Collegiate, and she was like, oh, you'll never guess what Georgia's doing now. What do you think she's doing? And he was like, oh, probably something, very creative. And she was like, well, she's teaching meditation. Love to give someone a shock. Dad was, I think he remained skeptical for probably the first few years. And he would make comments like, that rugby player came and learned to meditate. I saw a rugby player outside and he was just confused. To him, rugby players didn't meditate, and he kept seeing these people. Some guy turned up on a motorbike. What's he doing here? I was like, Dad, he's here to learn to meditate. So I was teaching often in my family home, and I still do in Hawke's Bay. And he's like, he just couldn't get it. He thought it was like a real left-wing thing that arty, hippie kind of people did. He still hasn't learned. He just...
He's hanging on.
It's not for him. He wants to stay stressed, I think. But it's... He's seen over time because people have come up to him, and I think his initial perception was that it would be this sort of maybe embarrassing thing or a slightly weird thing. Oh, George is doing that lovely little yoga thing, isn't it? Which still gets said from time to time. But he's also had people come up to him and say, oh, your daughter's changed my life, or my daughter's so much better from, learning that practice from Georgia. And so he's come around.
Amazing. And so 9 years... 1,500 students and growing. And are you still satisfied with what you're doing, and where do you see it going?
I mean, I think I'll always be teaching Vedic meditation because it's just such a foundational practice. It supports every other thing that you're going to do. And I get so much satisfaction out of seeing people experience that for the first time and the changes that come over time. It's always evolving, and I stay creative. The whole practice really enables and engenders that. So there's always something new happening, like this podcast has come along. I didn't really think I was going to do a podcast because I didn't want to do it just because I should or everyone's doing a podcast. I wanted it to really come from this spontaneous feeling. And that's when I started chatting to you about it was like, oh, I'm getting this feeling now. Now's the time, and I've got a few things I want to say. And that's really been born out of the power of the knowledge, the wisdom, and the way that I've been sharing it in certain settings, that particularly my membership space, Pocket Guru, where people are really, we've got such an active community. It's at 190 at the moment, I think. And people are hearing that wisdom, which I just drop into WhatsApp. It's a little bit more intimate space there where I share. People ask their personal questions indirectly to me, and then I respond to the group without revealing any personal details. So you get to hear, we've talked a little bit about my life, but we're talking about everyone's nitty-gritty patches, and how does the knowledge respond to that. Always raises your thinking about something and gives you a tool or a way of thinking about something in a slightly different way, which is freeing, which gets you to that unbound place. And I've seen such shifts happening for them that I felt, I want to do this more widely. So again, there's creative things happening, new spaces I'm moving into. I'm training some teachers, which will also be the next step at the end of 2026. And other offerings have come in, other supportive practices and tools to deepen the experience, Kriya and breathwork and japa and Vedic astrology, which we're going to talk to in a later episode. So, which I found they're always things that I have found benefit of on my own path. I'm like the guinea pig. If I don't get anything from it, nothing happens with it. If I find that it's really hitting a missing piece, then I'll bring it in, because my main intention is to support others, and if I'm feeling like there's just this need within the community of hundreds of people that I'm mentoring, thousands that I'm teaching, what I'm seeing and where people are struggling and how to unlock that. That is my, life's purpose, it feels like.
And so it's not just about meditation when you're talking about the knowledge. Where is the knowledge coming from?
Yeah, so meditation is a tool to give you access to that state of consciousness where you get to feel what is your total potential. Wherever you're at now, it can go so much further. Where I was at when I learned to meditate was like, wow, where I'm at now, I can't even conceive of. It's not that I'm a better person or anything, it's just my inner experience is so much better. My experience of life is so much deeper, so much richer, more bliss, and it's exciting because it just keeps going, and there's a leveling out, and sometimes that's a point of challenge and friction where you drop into the next layer. And this particular tradition of meditation comes from a body of wisdom that is at least 5,000 years old, but really it's just universal wisdom, which is that there is one universal field of creative intelligence. You are an aspect of that, which is exactly what quantum mechanics, quantum physics tells us, which is our most evolved scientific method. And I like the universality of that, and that universal wisdom about which is timeless. It comes from nature itself, where it came through various masters, yogis, rishis, sages, seers of reality. They were ones that were able to perceive what was going on at the subtle layers of reality without needing to do the scientific analysis. They were essentially downloading it through their very profound states of consciousness, which they'd really tuned using these various practices. And a lot of them centralize in India, but they're not Indian in nature, which Indians themselves know. They love it being shared, especially when it's shared purely on the whole. At least that's been my experience of spending a lot of time in India. And this realization that it's for everyone because it's universal wisdom. And India has performed such a profound function in preserving it really well. And something that we'll explore in other episodes is, well, how does that fit in with religion and where everyone feels, how a lot of people are feeling about religion, spirituality, and gurus and all the things in our next episode, because it starts to raise questions, or like, if I'm doing a spiritual practice, does it mean this? Did I have to give up that? Even that question, do I have to give up alcohol? Am I supposed to become a monk, an ascetic, a renunciate? Can I do it on the pathway of having children? What do I have to believe? All of those things. Let's clear the air on all of that, but that's to come.
Well, it's very exciting. We're going to get into all of the aspects of life and
all of the things.
Big, nitty, gritty, slightly uncomfortable questions.
Yeah, let's get unbound on all of it. And yeah, thank you so much for, being here with me and witnessing me sharing my story for the first time, and also sharing yours a little bit. There's so much more. And thank you all for joining us. And I hope you stay along for the journey.
Let's get unbound.
Let's get unbound. Thanks for getting unbound with us today. We'd so appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave us a review and to share this episode with anyone who you think could benefit. It helps us to keep these conscious conversations flowing. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. See you next week.